Cascade family law attorney Will Jones to talk about how to get an elderly abuse protective order. Hey, Will, how you doing today?
Not too bad, Steve. Still another cloudy day. Rainy, of course.
Yeah.
Welcome to the Pacific Northwest.
Yep. That is you have just defined Oregon in a nutshell. Which Oregon is very famous in producing. So before we get into the nuts and bolts of this, let's talk about what an elderly abuse restraining order is, because it has more to do with just elderly people, doesn't it?
It does. It also protects people with disabilities. We should kind of set out at the outset. These restraining orders, I've always called them EdPAPA restraining orders, elderly persons and people with disability. They're not that common. They do happen a lot. They obviously elder abuse is an issue. The more common restraining order is the FAPA, where someone's been physically abused. Generally, we see a lot of those. These are a little bit more rare, but they do protect a different class of people. So they do fill a hole that the FAPA doesn't.
Right, right. So what are the requirements of getting one?
So elderly persons, that one's pretty easy. 65 years of age or over. Finally, the law gives us a bright line. So if you're over 65, I'm sorry, but legally in Oregon, you're considered elderly. Right? It's the
Mm.
persons with disabilities that's a little bit more tricky. So generally, disabilities, we have, the common ones that you kind of deal with. Physical or mental impairment that limits one or more major life activities. So pretty broad, physical or mental that limits one or more major life activities. So what fits in there? All kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
And you could argue about that for days. Some of them are just very, very clear. A brain injury that results in some loss of function for a sufficient period of time. What's loss of function? What's sufficient period of time? Again, pretty broad. I wish it was clear, but a lot of the cases we see, at least on this part of the qualification, it's clear. There's a reason that this person is labeled as disabled. Um, Obviously, if someone has a guardian or a guardian ad litem, the court has already determined that they have a disability. That's why they have a guardian or guardian ad litem. That's someone that's assigned to help take care of some or all of their affairs. So the court's already made the determination that they're disabled. So a guardian or guardian ad litem can apply for whoever they're caring for. So those are the people who can get
Yeah.
it.
The what has to be done? I mean, what abuse can be defined differently in various different actions. And so in this particular, what does abuse mean?
So abuse here, and obviously this is a different realm than your standard FAPA. It's not just physical in this realm. So when you're talking about someone who's elderly or who has a disability, abuse can take on all different kinds of forms rather than abuse of someone you would see in a FAPA, right? So if you have someone with a disability, you could see, and these are some of them, cause physical injury or pain, right? Obviously, if that's abuse, it would be under FAPA just like anything. So that's encompassed here. But you're talking about things like neglect that results in harm, right? So someone has neglected someone who's elderly or disabled that causes them harm. Abandon, neglect, desertion. So a caregiver just takes off. That could qualify under this, assuming you have someone over 65 or who's disabled. Um, Also encompassed in this is threats, calling an elderly or disabled person derogatory names, cursing at you, inappropriate sexual comments, verbal abuse that maybe threatens physical harm or sexual harm. Um, Obviously, forcing someone who's elderly or disabled into non-consensual sexual contact is underneath this one. And then, kind of one of the bigger ones that we're seeing a little bit more uh, brings in some interstate issues. Wrongfully took money or property from you, right? That one gets really weird, specifically when you're dealing in the age of scams, right? What's wrongful? Taking of money, right? So there's a whole lot of scams out there that really target the elderly and mildly disabled who still have control of their funds to hand over money. So wrongful taking of money or property can be another big one. So with all of that, assuming you prove one of those things, there has to be continued threat of further abuse, right? If those things happen, yeah, you may have a civil claim for damages that could happen, but the restraining order as it exists is meant to prevent further abuse, right? You
Right.
can't do anything about prior abuses here. So you have to have a continued threat, immediate and present threat, or danger of further abuse because this restraining order looks forward. It looks back to get the facts to get the order, but it looks forward. We're trying to protect someone moving forward.
Yeah. How long does it look back? Is there can someone come in and say, well, 2 years ago, my caregiver took all my money and went to Vegas and didn't see her for 3 weeks?
So conceptually, it's 180 days, right? But things outside of that period and going all the way back are clearly relevant, right? So you got to have something that's more recent. But if you're talking about 2 years ago, you can go, look, this is a pattern, right? This is continuing to happen. This happened 5 years ago and hasn't happened since then. The court's going to go, what are we protecting from then? Something
Yeah.
happened 5 years ago that you don't have that continued threat. So
Right.
still relevant, although not within the time.
Got it. So how does someone obtain an DAPA?
And Papa.
And
Um,
PAPA?
so
It, because it's, if someone is elderly or someone is has disabilities, it can be kind of difficult for them to necessarily fulfill some of the, like, going to the courthouse stuff.
so courthouse, obviously, any circuit court can grant these. Forms are generally available online, although a little harder to find than the FAPA restraining order forms, but they are available online. So there's a petition that you fill out that says, hey, here's who I am. Here's why I meet the over 65 or disabled requirements. Can be filled out either by the person or their guardian or a household member for that matter. So file that in the circuit court at a proceeding called ex parte. What ex parte means is only one side appears, right? So you don't have to bring the abuser in with you. You go to the court with your petition. Judge is going to review it. Maybe not ask some questions. Depends on how individual judges handle their ex parte appearances. They're going to look at it and go, does this or does this not meet the requirements? If it does, the court's going to grant the order, sign it. Great. If the court looks at it and goes, look, you're not over 65 and you're not disabled, sorry, denied, if it's denied, that's the end of the story. Doesn't mean he can't reapply, but the order has no effect. Even a granted order has no effect until it's served on the other party, right? So until they get the order, it has no effect. So you go, you get the order, you hang on to it, you run around, you do whatever you do. If you never serve it on them, it's never in effect. Service can be done through the sheriff, which is generally free in this realm, or it can be done via private process server. The person who is the petitioner who filled out the order cannot serve it, right? Nor would you want to. You don't want to go to the person who's abusing you and go, don't abuse me anymore. But under law, service can't happen by a party to the case.
Right.
So once it's served, order's in effect, and you're off and rolling.
So this was kind of an interesting one, and my question starts with who can object and what happens if they object? Because there's sort of a different person who can object that you wouldn't really think about in a normal protective order.
Well, these are a little bit different because in most restraining orders, specifically FAPA, stock and protective order as well, a hearing date isn't automatically set. For most of these, it is, right? You get the order and the judge sets a contested hearing date, right? So in other ones, you have to file a request for hearing. Most of the time in these, you do not. It can be a little bit county specific. So if you get served with one of these, make sure you look at it. The elderly or disabled person also has the right to object. So if someone is, say, disabled and their guardian goes ahead and gets the order for them against another person, the elderly or disabled person who's actually protected can object to the order as well
Yeah.
and say, no, I'm fine with this person wrongfully taking property from me. But it can't happen that way, where the person who is either eld or disabled goes, I don't want the order. This person who got it for me thinks I need the order and I don't. So it's kind of a little bit different than your standard FAPA, but a lot of the same principles and policies will still apply.
Yeah. So once it happens, if the judge says yes, your objection, I'm not gonna overrule it. I'm gonna allow it to continue into effect. How long does it remain in effect?
A year. So 365 American days. It can be renewed though, right? So you can continue to deal with renewal after renewal, assuming you're timely within that renewal. Once it's dismissed, you have to reapply for the order.
Can that continue? Or is there a limit on how many times you can do that?
Not really, in a legal fiction sense. But you can see factually, if you have the order, there's been no abuse after 3, 4, 5 renewals, a judge is going to be pretty questionable going, why do I need to continue this order? You haven't had contact in 5 years. Do you even know where they are?
Yeah. So what happens if someone violates the order?
Automatic arrest. So call the sheriff, the cops, whoever it is. They'll come and pick them up as quick as they can. They're pretty busy these days, but they'll get over there. Instant arrest, they go right to jail.
If they, I mean, since they automatically go to jail, um, does the district attorney need to then go forward to press criminal charges, or can they do that, or how does that kind of terminate? They don't just stay in jail with nothing happening, do they?
No, they don't just keep them there forever, which would be nice. Really, it can take two paths, depending on how criminal it is. Generally, what you see is contempt. Contempt is the willful violation of a court's order or judgment. So generally, you're going to see some manner of contempt penalty. Eventually, it becomes what's called punitive contempt. And punitive contempt can result in jail time. Now you're talking a criminal side that you need a DA to bring those charges. So a DA could be involved, or it could just be contempt. It could be just part of a release agreement. Kind of depends on how egregious we're talking about.
Got it. Got it. Well, Will, that was incredibly informative. And thank you for sitting down to talk with us about, how you get an elderly abuse protective order. And I'm so thankful you were here today because, again, these are really not easy things to understand, but you make them sound easy. So thank you.
Happy to help anytime.
You bet. And everyone else, thank you for joining us. If anyone has any further questions, feel free to contact our firm. You can get connected with an attorney who can help you. Stay safe, stay happy, and be well.